get started. Can everyone hear me all right? Yeah. Sorry, I've sort of lost my voice. I've got this bloody cold, so forgive me. Anyway, my name's Joanna Cherry. I'm I'm the MP for Edinburgh South West, and I am a lesbian. I don't have a penis. I'm not bothered. Anyway, you're very welcome. Thank you so much for coming along this evening, and thank you to my friends at LGBT Alliance and my friends at Lesbian Labour for organising this meeting. Unfortunately, Lesbian SNP consists pretty much just of me now.
And Nicola.
But we hold different views on the issue of whether or not lesbians get penises. But if anyone else wants to join Lesbian SNP and make me a bit less lonely, you would be very, very welcome. We seem to be on a bit of an upward trajectory at the moment. Anyway, I'm just going to give a bit of an outline of the evening before I introduce our guests. But before I give an outline of the evening, and in order to save my voice, I'm going to introduce my charming assistant, Kate, who will give us some information about housekeeping matters and fire safety. I told you not to get the old dear to do it.
I'm Kate Harris from LGBT Alliance. Just want to say how fantastic it is that we've actually got a lesbian event. This is the first lesbian event that LGBT Alliance has run. We have already done a gay men's event, which is called Very British Gays, a film which we're going to be showing in March. But as LGBT Alliance, we welcome lesbians doing their own thing, gay men doing their own thing, bisexuals doing their own thing, and then everybody doing things together when we need to change the government's mind about something. I particularly want to thank a special guest of honour, a very modest one, who none of you will have said hello to on your way in. And her name is Eileen Gallagher, OBE. She is a legend in her own lunchtime, sitting next to her partner Anne, both Ouija's, I'm ashamed to say. But what you need to know about Eileen is that she may not be a billionaire, but she's in the J.K. Rowling mould of an extremely successful businesswoman who had zero need to get involved in this shit. And I can't tell you what a difference she's made to my life and my survival since she volunteered to be our chair of trustees. And I didn't want this first lesbian event to go by without thanking you from the bottom of my heart.
Thank you.
And that's enough of the schmaltzy stuff. My job is to tell you where the lavatories are. In case of emergencies, the lavatories are through those doors and on your left. If there is a fire, the fire exit is past the lavies, past the bar, straight ahead. There's a door that actually you push the handle and you go out. You can't come back in, so don't go out of there unless there's a fire. If you are of the smoking persuasion, there's a fabulous smoking balcony upstairs, back towards the entrance, halfway along through the bar, just turn left. And my only other job is to say, please do take photos of yourselves as LGBT Alliance criminal. I keep getting it wrong. It's like when I was on the Brexit demo and I was going, what do we want? What do we want? When do we want it? What do we want? Brexit! And then I realised I was on the Remain march. But anyway, if you feel like having your photo taken, do. And I think that's it. I've got the running order if anyone hasn't got one. And now I'll hand over to the wonderful, fabulous, international, globally praised panel of lesbian experts.
I've got to say something very important about Eileen and Anne, which it was their production company that made Bad Girls. Very happy memory for many of us. So I'm just going to say a bit about the outline of the evening. We've got 4 speakers here who I'm going to introduce in a minute, and we'll hear from each of them, and then we will have a Q&A, and then we'll have a break after an hour or so, and the bar will be open. Actually, I think it's open already. And then at 8:30, we're going to have a performance part of the evening. and I will leave Kate to introduce that when that comes along, and then as the evening progresses we'll have a bit of music and socialising. Anyway, but just before I introduce our panel, I just wanted to say just a few words. First of all, I'm really delighted that we're having a lesbian event in Edinburgh. It is of course LGBT History Month. As I said in the House of Commons recently, that should be a time of celebration for lesbians, but most of us don't feel much like celebrating. And the reason why we don't feel like celebrating is we feel that women who love women are being forced back into the closet. Sally Wainwright, my constituent, put it so powerfully in a column she wrote in the Times last month. We thought the days of lesbophobia were over when Clause 28 was repealed, Clause 2A as it was in Scotland, and then we got equal marriage. But in actual fact, as a result of the more extreme manifestations of gender ideology, we don't feel free to meet any longer as lesbians, and sometimes we don't even feel safe to actually say and name who we are and what we are. And unfortunately, many politicians and many public organisations have let that happen without any protest whatsoever and without supporting us at all. But I think I don't need to say too much about why the tide might finally be turning, particularly in Scotland. I think it was planned for Scotland to lead the way in one particular respect, but it might look like we will lead the way, but not quite in the way that was planned by some people who shall remain unmentioned tonight, at least not by me. So I'm not going to say much more other than to say that there's been some very good work done, particularly by Sex Matters, which is going to be published soon, on lesbian rights and lesbian human rights. I've written a foreword to it, so watch out for it, stating very clearly why we do have the right to associate as lesbians and why we do have freedom of speech as lesbians. And I think that's going to be a really important piece of work for us going forward. But that's really all I'm going to say at the moment, other than just to introduce our panel. Now, our sort of, no offence to the other panellists, but our guest of honour this evening is Tonya, who's come all the way from Norway. I'll say a bit more about Tonya in a minute. We're also joined by our very own Rona Hotchkiss. This is my left. We have Nicole, an Edinburgh girl. And not last but not least, we've got Paula Bolton from Lesbian Labour. Tonya is the inspiration for tonight's event. That's why it's called Lesbian Not Criminal. Tonya's a Norwegian visual artist, a composer, an editor, a filmmaker and an activist. And she has participated at renowned Norwegian and international visual art, film and LGBT festivals, and scene making. She's been part of LGBT culture since she was 16 years old. Her main project, I think, is the lesbian performance group Hungry Hearts. Yay! But lately she's been embroiled in a legal situation, and I'm not going to steal her thunder. I'm going to let her tell you all about that herself. Tonya.
Just want to start with to thank LGBT Alliance and Lesbian Labour for organizing this Lesbian Not Criminal tour. And for me it's important to tell my story, so that's what I'm going to do. So, my name is Tonje Evjon. I'm an artist, a woman and a lesbian, and I have been under investigation for breach of the Norwegian hate speech law. This morning, I received a letter from the police saying, and I quote, "You are hereby notified that the case against you has been dismissed because no criminal offense is considered proven." This means that the investigation strongly suggests that nothing punishable has happened. That was the quote. So my comment on this is that we must use the freedom of speech while we have it, and by reacting and pointing out the injustice of the law on self-identification, we can reclaim our rights as women and lesbians. lesbian women.
Yes.
And I would like to quote Christina Ellingsen, her brilliant call to action, which is use your rights or lose your rights. We have the opportunity to speak up now, and I would encourage everybody to do so. It's good that the case against me has been dropped, but it is still discrimination against lesbians. That this kind of law has been introduced without taking into account how it affects lesbian and women, and lesbian women and women. So, how did it happen? What have I done? And why do I do the things I do? I do not believe in the concept of gendered identities, and I insist on my right to reject this belief and put into words how degrading and damaging the inclusion of the concept gendered identities into legislation are for women. As an artist, a woman, and a lesbian, I have experienced the culture of abuse developed and legitimized in the wake of the legislation of gender identities. In Norway, the hate speech law and the other laws, such as self-ID law, are being abused by trans activists and LGBTQ organizations in the harassment of others, especially women. I have, during the last 6 years, in every available way, articulated and warned about how the replacement of the term sex to gender identity in legislation is harmful for children and women's safety. I have published articles, participated in public hearings and debates about sex, gender roles, and sexual orientation. And until 2017, it was actually possible to debate these issues fiercely in one moment, and in the next moment to go to a bar and have beer with dissenters. But the minute gender self-ID came into Norwegian legislation in 2016, any attempt to bring different perspectives into the debate was met with no debate, cancel culture, demonization, emotional blackmail, and attempts to take away the livelihood from women's rights campaigners was established and scared the wits out of people. They have succeeded in taking away my livelihood, but I'm not scared. Especially lesbians inside the LGBTQI is trying to raise awareness about how legislation and gender identities having a harmful impact on the safety of women and children. Safety of women and children have experienced extreme social control and the strain of standing alone against the many. We have experienced being ridiculed, harassed, and ostracized without anyone intervening. The powerlessness I have experienced in the face of the mob has caused damage to me and those close to me. As a professional artist, I have made and produced films, videos, performances, visual art, and songs commenting on issues related to women, lesbians, the female body, and the LGBTQ movement since 1999. In 2018, I was denied performing a song called Vagina Anthem. Yay! By the very art institution inviting me to participate in the exhibition. The curator called me up on my phone some days before the opening and told me she and her leaders in the institution had decided that the lyrics in Vagina Anthem could offend men who did not have could offend men that did not have a vagina. And that the song potentially could hurt and offend men wearing gendered identities. She also told me they could not ensure my safety. So I and my lesbian performance group got cancelled. In December 2021, I was told by a gallerist that I am an artist no one can be associated with, and that I am in fact blacklisted. She told me this in a phone call as part of her explanation for cancelling me from the exhibition I was to curate at her art venue. In March 2022, trans activists contacted my wives and police in what I see as an attempt to silence and destroy me. The occasion was that my wife stood by my side to protect me at the Women's Day demonstration, the 8th of March. Here, me and Women's Declaration in Norway had the audacity to carry a placard with the text "Trans women are men." and my wife was accused of spreading hate and deemed unfit for her job merely by present nearby this placard standing next to me for protection. My wife is dedicated, and this has led to her being a professor in nursing. When the trans activists tried to destroy her career, something inside me was broken. The national LGBTQI organizations are funded by the government with at least 30 million Norwegian crowns a year. These organizations, which should in fact be termed as TQ+ organizations, employ heterosexual men identifying as women, lesbians and mothers. These men wearing gender identities also educate and advise children and young homosexual boys and lesbians. In Norwegian schools, children are exposed to and educated in the gender identity belief presented as a new reality. Women and men in Norway, academics, biologists, doctors, parents, children, students, and politicians who have the guts to talk about, argue, and discuss issues attached to the legislation of gender identities are being targeted by the TQ+ mob. Lesbians like me, opposing that men can be lesbians, are labeled as transphobes, TERFs, and hateful Nazi bigots, just like lesbians in the 70s who were labeled frigid man-haters. It is deeply homophobic and misogynistic and it does harm and damage. And when we use platforms like Fox News, we are accused for serving the purpose of Nazis and far rights. So, also from within, so-called feminists, we are criticized. I have lost my income, my livelihood, my good name and reputation, and of course I want to tell my story. The left has left lesbians and women's biological reality and lived reality behind, and condemned us, and they condemn us for telling our stories at their own platforms. I will tell my story at any platform. And I also ask, how dare you to demand me to be silent about the abuse and attack on me and my family? This abuse for me is worse than serving time in jail for defending lesbians and women's rights. So, what happened? On the 3rd of September 2022, the Norwegian Supreme Court set a precedence with Section 185 of the Criminal Code on hate speech. It's called the Hordaland case. And here a man was sentenced to a suspended prison sentence and fine. The court found that he had made offensive and punishable remarks towards a man identifying himself as a trans woman. So therefore, the 1st of October, I deliberately used the same wording in public as the man who was convicted in the Hordaland case and linked it to my lesbian sexual orientation. And I did this to challenge an indefensible law and the government's and parliament's indefensible handling on the concept gender identity. I wanted to reveal that the intention of including lesbians in Section 185 was to protect lesbians from sexual harassment and hate speech. And when the parliament in 2020 included gender identity in the same law, it had the opposite consequence for what it intended to do. Because by including gender identity in Section 185, the parliament gave men a legal alibi to expose lesbians to sexual harassment, discrimination, and incitement. The conviction in the Hordaland case is relevant to women, especially lesbians, because the judgment from Supreme Court removes a necessary tool for girls and women. A piece of legislation that deprives lesbians of the need to spot and call out abusive behavior among men, regardless of the gender identity they wear, is harmful to lesbians. We must be able to call out the behavior of these men without having to be careful with what word we use. On the 17th of November, I received a letter from the police with a report and summons for questioning. And it was the National Competence Center in Hate Crime that has reported the case, based on an anonymous tip. And on the 9th of December, I appeared for questioning at the police station, and the 12th of November, I signed the questioning protocol. And then, when I was reported by the police and under investigation, the most prominent trans activists were criticizing the police for doing so. They claimed that they don't want me to be investigated or convicted for emphasizing that men can't be lesbians. Maybe it started to dawn on them that the living picture of a lesbian artist taken to court for calling out heterosexual men fetishizing lesbianism doesn't serve the LGBTQI organization well. As a society, we are required to protect children and women from adult men with abusive behavior, also those adults wearing gendered identities. It is convincing children that they might be born in the wrong body that should be illegal, not pointing out the vast and destructive consequences of this new belief system. Inclusion of gendered identities in legislations are in fact protecting an abusive behavior of adult persons demanding that the entire population recognize their belief system. By doing so, the safety of women and girls are set aside. So the Norwegian Self-ID Act is deeply offensive to women, including lesbian women. It is indefensible and has not taken into account how it can affect women and lesbian women. That in itself is discrimination against women. The law involves pervasive discrimination against women. And I want to highlight that the inclusion of lesbians in general, recommendation number 28 and 22 in the UN Women's Rights Declaration have made it clear long ago that lesbians have the right to protection against the sexual harassment we are exposed to when men claim to be lesbians. And that the inclusion of gender identity in the same recommendation obviously refers to women who claim to have all kinds of gender identities, not to men who claim to be women. The laws relating to self-ID are irrational. It is an encroachment on freedom of expression that affects everyone, but especially women, lesbians and artists. An opportunity for academics to carry out their work, which is based on critical thinking. It's obvious that those behind the legislation have not thought it through carefully. For what should be the consequences? For what should the consequences of the law be? I actually think that's it.
Thank you. It's a huge relief to hear that they've got the charges, and you know, in this country, our parliament passed hate crime legislation about a year and a half ago that still hasn't been brought into force, but many of us had worries that it would be used against lesbians and feminists in the way that your hate crime legislation is being used against you. But personally speaking, as a lawyer, I don't see how legislation in Norway, or indeed legislation in Scotland, if it's ever brought into force, could possibly survive a challenge under Article 10 of the European Convention of Human Rights, which is the right to freedom of speech, and also Article 9, which is freedom of belief. And in fact, last year, my other job as a lawyer, I represented a woman who was charged under the more old-fashioned hate crime legislation in this country. We managed to persuade the Crown to drop the charges by writing to them in detail about the position under the European Convention of Human Rights, which every country in Europe, apart from Belarus and Russia, is signed up to. Although some of the Tories would like to see Britain join that exclusive little club of Belarus and Russia, I don't think that's likely to happen in the near future, if at all. Anyway, I'm going to hand over next to the other croaky person here this evening, who is Rona Hotchkiss. When Kate was writing up the bio notes for tonight, she described Rona as in danger of becoming a national treasure in Scotland. I like to describe Rona as the thinking straight woman's lesbian crumpet. And we all know why. Rona's been out since 1980. She comes from a background of being brought up in evangelical Christianity. She's spent 20 years plus driving the NHS mad. She joined the prison service and became a real out lesbian governor. We still are beating hearts, and it has made her a particularly authoritative voice, speaking out for lesbians and women in the debate about self-identification in Scotland. So over to you, Rona.
I was hoping that my voice being like this might make me sound like Mariella Frostrup, but it just makes me sound like Billy Connolly after that. I apologise. So in thinking about what I wanted to say tonight, I was thinking about my own life as a lesbian coming out at about 19 or so, and trying to compare it in my mind to the life of my 23-year-old lesbian niece who's in the audience, who, by the way, if I can say it without crying, and she cast me in the Waltons the next time we do something. Gave me one of the proudest moments of my life when she ran out to play rugby for Scotland. I had to be physically restrained from running onto the pitch and somebody flattened her. Anyway, so what I wanted to say was, of course, lesbians are the original gender non-conformists, and that will have been the experience of many women in here, regardless of your age. But we are the women that were known as tomboys when we were growing up, and probably like me, some of you, not all of you, but some of you rejected the hair ribbons your mum tried to put in, and the party dresses they used to buy you from the shop, and the dolls and all the rest of that crap. And I asked for football boots for my 9th birthday and never got them. Didn't even get a pair of trousers till I was 10. But that's a common way for lesbians to grow up, as again, not all of the lesbians and bi women. But nobody would have suggested that I needed to be something I wasn't at that time. We were allowed to grow up like that, and people kind of shook their heads indulgently and so on. Nobody suggested I could have been born in the wrong body, or that I was actually a boy, and that's not true for people like my niece now today. As I got older, and once I threw off the shackles of Christianity, I saw the dark. I threw off the shackles of evangelical Christianity. I didn't quite get out of it unscathed because they did try to exorcise me from the spirit of homosexuality. Came back sevenfold. So it obviously didn't work. It had absolutely no effect on me. But as I got older, I volunteered with Lesbian Line. I did that for about 3 years. I don't drink at all, never have, and I'm not a great one for pubs and clubs. So although I organised discos where thousands of folk came in the door called Rita Mae Brown and Martina and Vata because not one of them was her. Because people didn't want to put their real names down. But anyway, that was the way it was. I started to organise sports groups. I was more into sports and so on. My niece definitely gets that from me. So badminton, football, hill walking, climbing. Sally and I did a few things like that together years ago. And really sport was, happily for me, a refuge. It was a place that a lot of lesbians found themselves, because you could be among women, you could be among lesbians away from men, and the kind of qualities that the world looked down on you having as a lesbian were valued. So you could be strong, you could be competitive, you could take a pride in being a decisive person and all of these kind of things. And it really was absolutely fantastic to have that. And I don't know if my niece will comment later, but it's changing, and it's changed. And it's not the same now, because lesbians in sport are threatened by the inclusion of men who identify as women. And that's a real threat to some of the safe places that we had. We got equal marriage, and not that I was particularly in favour of it. As far as I'm concerned, it's a cornerstone of the patriarchy. It should be in it, but never mind. It's, I expected it to be better. No, I would do it like, doesn't bother me. That's very magnanimous of me, isn't it? But anyway, so we got equal marriage, and it seemed like that for about 5 minutes things were looking good for LGBT people in this country. Maybe we got complacent. I don't know. Maybe we got complacent because we thought everything was fine, and maybe that's why there was the demise of lesbian clubs and bars and all that kind of thing, because it just became too easy to mix. So I think we got about 5 minutes before Stonewall started calling us all sexual racists. And many of our heroes, the lesbians of yesteryear that we looked up to, were being retrospectively transed. You know, they were starting to query people who dressed differently, lived differently, expressed themselves differently. We knew them as lesbians, and now people are telling us they're men. But let me be clear, when idiots like Peter Tatchell talk about LGBTQ plus history, referring to things that happened in the 70s and 80s, actions that were done, pride parades, social gatherings, he's lying. If you look at the banners back from then, if you look at the posters, if you look at how they were described, those initials were not there. These people were not there. It's a lie, and it's historically revealed. I was involved in lesbian life for about 3 years, so really involved in the lesbian scene in Glasgow, and sometimes we come over to Edinburgh. I always brought a rear gunner. But they went around in these places. Either my partner's here tonight, and she's a lot older than me. But she's a Londoner and was hugely involved. She was the chair of London Switchboard, and she was on the Pride committees and all that kind of thing. And she'll tell you that as well. There was no significant presence of TQ plus anything in these days. And these people are lying. And you hear people like Angela Eagle talking about LGBTQ plus issues, but you're a liar, Angela Eagle, you're a liar. And you're also you're rubbishing the memories and the legacy of the women and men who had to fight the battles they did to establish this. As I think Joanna mentioned, I don't know what the Edinburgh equivalent of Ballycloney after a night out. We just dropped a cherry after a night then. As Joanna mentioned, I was the Scottish Prison Service's first out gay governor. And I never experienced a minute's trouble for that. It was a really, really good place to be gay. There was no issue at all. I was also, in fact, am for the next 10 days, the only ever out gay person that the Special Health Board in Scotland has ever had. Now, it was bad enough when Gender GP and some trans extremists tried to get rid of me, but when the Pride Network at the Health Board tried to get rid of me, I just thought that was absolutely outrageous. They wouldn't meet with me, they wouldn't talk to me, I wasn't allowed to know what they had said, they just wanted me sacked for my views. My niece alerted me the other night to the fact that a video of me speaking was on TikTok. It's not a thing I go on. TikTok, so they just joined so I could look. What was kind of like my hair in the video? It was quite sitting quite nicely, the colours on it. And I was wearing a watch, makes my hands look nice. Anyway, do you know that song, Your Hands Turn Me On When You're Driving? I'll tell you about it after that. Anyway, so I watched, I looked at myself on TikTok for about 2 minutes, I didn't listen to myself, but the really encouraging thing for me was the comments. I was absolutely astounded because there was barely a person there over 25, and I think I got, I can't even remember, thousands of retweets and likes, or retalks or whatever, and likes from all of these people who were under 25. And I thought to myself, that's the silent majority. These are all the young women, the young lesbians who are too scared to speak out. So I'll come back to that at the end, but I found 2 or 3 negative comments. First of all, there's a couple of people saying, you should be ashamed of yourself for allowing drugs in your prisons. And another couple who said, she looks trans. And I thought, no, don't. I look like what I am at the time, a 59-year-old lesbian, because this is what we look like. And we're still non-conforming. So we have men now claiming to be lesbians. And I noticed, I read something the other day from the Equality Network in Scotland. I think it was Tim Hawkins. Anyway, he says that their position is that if you're a woman who is exclusively same-self attracted, same-sex attracted, same-self, that's quite something, isn't it? I know I'm a bit This is just a tiny transition. Anyway, if you're a woman who's exclusively same-sex attracted, you need to stop calling yourself a lesbian and find another word. This is, and these people get money from the government, for God's sake. That's no great surprise. So just before we get too depressed, I have to say that when I was a young lesbian growing up, although we couldn't really be very out or open, there was a real thrill in being underground. Do you know what I mean? There was a real solidarity, and once you get into some bar or pub or whatever, you thought, oh, I can relax. Do you know what I mean? And the jokes flowed and you could be yourself. And I have to say that this last 3 years has given me that back. Because the feeling of solidarity and sisterhood among lesbians and our heterosexual allies has been absolutely fantastic. And it's been sustaining and it's been life affirming. And it's the thing that has got us all through this, I think. I have to say as well, support from gay men has been terrific, because that hasn't always been there. But a lot of gay men have stood up because they realise the double hit that lesbians are getting. And not least our heterosexual sisters, just the support we've had from them has been outstanding. And finally, I think what I wanted to say was that it is difficult for young lesbians and bi women to speak up now. They've got their whole lives in front of them. They stand to lose a lot, if not everything, by standing up, so we've got to do it for them. All of us in this room who no longer give a fuck, never mind two, have to stand up and be proud and say, I am same-sex attracted, I am a lesbian. The chief prerequisite for being a lesbian is being a woman. If you were born male, you have never been, you are not now, and you never will be a woman, far less a lesbian. So all you old dykes in the audience, get your courage and speak up if you haven't already. And let's always claim, along with Anne Lister, I love and only love the fair sex.
Thanks, Rona. You've really given me a bit of a lump in my throat there. It's phlegm. Don't have phlegm in it. Our next speaker is Nicole Jones, who I know to be a really outstanding and excellent artist, but she's also a writer and a women's rights campaigner. She's been writing and publicly speaking about issues relating to sex and gender since 2016, a lot longer than some of us, including me. And in 2020, she founded the XX Feminist Network. That's a youth-led group united by the principle that freedom of expression and freedom of association are fundamental principles of women's liberation. So we're particularly delighted to have you here tonight, Nicole, also partly because you're a lot younger than most of us. Really looking forward to hearing from you.
Can you hear me? Is that, am I audible? No, not so close.
Can we do something with because when we look at Nicole, all we can see is lesbian labour.
No,
yeah. Could you move or could it go off or something?
I feel like I'm being interrogated.
It's very distracting.
Should I shut it on?
I think that would be helpful to sleep, if you wouldn't mind.
So I have some notes, but I might end up freestyling because my hands are really sweaty. So I wanted to start by talking about like how I got involved with this. This is usually one of the questions that people ask because I'm young. It just stick out a bit. And it was basically like when I was a teenager, I was interested in reading about. Should I just like hold it? Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah. So I was just really interested in feminist theory and reading about feminist theory and all the different like schools of thought. And I would read queer theory, liberal feminist stuff, but I always found radical feminism the most compelling, like feminist current, that kind of thing. And I was really lucky because I had a family that encouraged me to question everything. My teachers at school allowed me to write essays where I would quote people that, you know, would be considered TERFs. I remember having an argument with my English teacher where I quoted Sheila Jeffries and I used the term sex caste system. And she's like, that's not a real thing. I was like, no, it is just. But there's a lot of shutting down of that discussion that goes on now, so I was quite grateful for that. And I also feel like it gave me the like a protective armor that I had in analysis. So when I was coming out as a lesbian, realising that I was attracted to other women, I had a lot of body image issues. And I saw, I didn't like male attention, but I didn't know why I didn't like male attention. So I perceived my body to be the source of everything that was wrong. And I thought if I just was, you know, thin with no boobs and androgynous, then I'd be neutral and I'd move about the world freely. And then I realised I was gay. And it was just like I wasn't doing that. So my experience with like what I call sex dysphoria, because I don't think gender dysphoria is a helpful term, because I feel like gender is inherently distressing and any feminist should be against it. Informed my conclusions. I could understand the motivation behind adolescent trans identification, but I remained unconvinced as to the ethics and effectiveness of medical transition and the political implications of policy based on self-ID. And my dysphoria reigned as I realised I was attracted to other women. And so I never really like fit in with my peer group, partly because I was a gay in a village, and partly because I was really nerdy. And so my mum used to tell me that when I got to uni, I'd meet my tribe. Some of them are in the audience, but for the most part, like, I mean, I'm in the art school, and it's the art world is just completely like captured. I call it the gender trenches. So like the situation facing young lesbian, bisexual women and feminist women as well, when they reach university today, is one of overwhelming institutional capture and social pressure. So I was like out as GC when I reached uni, so I didn't really have a choice over like how much I could disclose to people, whether or not, you know, I would be known as a TERF because they'd add me on Facebook and then boom, there you are. So my sort of experience was characterised by a sense of like anxious dread. I had this like sort of pervasive feeling of, do they know? What will they think when they find out? And other women I speak to who are more private about their views and their same-sex attraction, you know, the feeling is like, it is like being in the closet. There's a sense of shame, you're made to feel toxic, that you have to pick your words very carefully. You go into these spaces and they're doing the pronoun rituals, and there's, you know, when you go into a gay space, it shouldn't be the case that your adrenaline is coursing through your body. You're supposed to feel like you're home. But whenever I go to LGBT events at the uni or feminist events, it's like, it's a really unpleasant exercise because all you have to do is skip the pronoun ritual, and then it's a way of weeding out the dissenters so they know that you haven't, because you haven't participated, why? And people start looking at you. And if you ask questions, and you're like done for. So the groups and societies and events that are set up to represent us have made it clear that we are not welcome. And so the resulting negative attention makes these spaces very unpleasant, and so you're left not bothering, you self-exclude, and young women, young lesbian women are faced with like a choice, as it were, so you either self-censor or self-exclude, and it shouldn't be the case that women are reaching university, which should be a time of like exploration, you know, finding your community, and feel afraid of their friends, of, you know, staff. The staff get involved in these open letters and they tweet most horrendous things. The staff pride network at my university are questionable. They hosted an event. They hosted an event with Katie Montgomery recently, and he included on his slide and the list of dog whistles the term same-sex attraction. So it gives you a sense of when you're in these spaces, it's very hostile. It's like a political rally, and that's up on the screen. And if you're unsure, or like, you know, you want to be part of the community. A lot of people who are gay, they come out, they sort of, it might be the case that they really had hostility from their families, and so LGBT for a lot of people is like a refuge, and so you stand to lose everything if you get excommunicated from these communities based on political, you know, phrasing. And I was also in another event recently which had the same dynamic, which was a FemSoc event, and one woman mentioned an academic at the uni and said that she described herself as same-sex attracted, I'm not saying gender attracted. And there was an eyebrow raised, and she goes, interesting. But I thought we'd reached the point where same-sex attraction wasn't interesting. And so, yeah, the dynamic there is, as I said, social shaming. People in that room who think, well, no, I consider myself same-sex attracted. I'm not attracted to makeup and heels on a man, and I'm attracted to women. They just learn not to say it. And I'm quite lucky that I went to uni slightly late. It was 2 years out when I went back, that I already had an established sort of life and friendships up here, because for a lot of young women who come when they're 18 and then they're in halls, I've had women reach out to me whose daughters are in halls who are getting bullied. It's all they have. And so if they lose that, then they're really on their own. And so it's near impossible to sort of challenge this within your social circles, which is where most of it happens, I think. But yeah, and my experience of like my social experience, like I've been refused service twice at bars because of my views. I've been stared out of a bar with my former partner who was recognisable because she was a figure in this, and there was somebody in full drag just staring at us, and we were like, we need to leave. But yeah, so what else was I going to say? Yeah, so I wanted to, when I was talking about like the LGBT historically, there was no T and Q and everything, and how it's been revised in. I was looking at, this is really awkward, sorry. So I was looking, one of my like researchy things has been trying to understand where it went wrong in university spaces, and I focus on university spaces because that's where the indoctrination is happening. And in 2005, the NUS LGBT campaign, formerly LGB, added the T, and their reason for doing so was that although the causes of LGBT discrimination are varied and complex, historically lesbians, gay men, bisexual and trans people have all faced oppression because of our existence challenges rigid and repressive notions of appropriate gender behaviour. So this just seems to me like an example of forced teaming, and LGBT people have never demanded to be accepted based on what we're not. Our sex non-conformity challenges notions of appropriate sex behaviour precisely because we challenge these norms as women. We never claimed that by dressing in masculine clothing or by loving other women that we were really men and demanded for society to accommodate us on that basis. In fact, the idea that non-conformity makes women like men is the argument of homophobes, and they continue to make it to this day. You know, when they say, well, actually, no, you look like you could be trans. It's the age-old argument that lesbians look like men. It's in this idea that your subjective inner state or gender presentation transforms you into the opposite sex. And by extension, that same-sex attraction is actually same-gender attraction, enforces the regressive stereotypes that lesbians and feminists have long sought to oppose. And there's a really funny, I'll mention one more thing about the NUS campaign, because it's, they, shortly after they added the T, they added queer, and their definition of queer, they said there's no accepted definition of queer. Included under the queer umbrella are asexual people, autosexual people, and gender-normative heterosexuals whose sexual pleasure preferences place them outside the mainstream, e.g. BDSM practitioners or polyamorous people. And they said that given this, none of these people are oppressed or discriminated against in the same way that LGBT people are. And so they resolved to exclude students who were both heterosexual and non-trans from the campaign and the definition of queer. But they were really worried about robustly defending their autonomy. They were like, how do we include these people whilst also defending our autonomy as a campaign? And so yeah, they excluded the heterosexual people, but by this point the campaign was already based on self-identification. So anybody can just identify as anything. Your safeguards are completely useless. I think that this was sort of like, the motivation was to just be kind because they get flack, we get flack, let's make it so that like, you know, we're in this together. And the logical conclusion of like incorporating queer like wasn't considered, and now you're in a position where like you get straight men running the feminist societies and lesbian societies. There was a straight man at Edinburgh Uni a few years ago who hounded Magdalene Burns and managed to succeed in getting her permanently reprimanded. But before that, she ran as Women's Liberation Governor and wanted to bring the safe space policy, which included homophobia, in line with the Equality Act. And as a result of this, they said that she breached the safe space policy, and they tried to change the rules so that nobody could run if they were in breach of the safe space policy. So there's this the point I'm trying to make in this like big long ramble is there's this fortification of these spaces, and before that it was Judy Bindel as well, the arguments of lesbian feminists are not reaching young people easily. They are socially shaming anybody who asks the questions in their spaces and making it so that, like, you know, the speakers just won't be platformed. But I do think it's changing. At the time that Magdalene was hounded, this was pre-forced data, and I think that we're in a situation now where if I was called in for a complaint, I know that I would have members of staff and other students on my side with me. There would be national press attention, and it would be illegal, as I said, with forced data. And so I think that there's more of a middle ground now, and it's hopeful, but it's still the case that I wouldn't bother going to the LGBT society events and everything. That's where I stopped making notes. So I think that what I wanted to emphasise was that it is legal to be same-sex, like that. Oh God. So like, excuse me, right. So yeah, the GRA bill is going to be like the final nail in the coffin for this like situation that we find ourselves in. Like a lot of it before was like cultural and all of that stuff with the students and their like ideological like lobbying and stuff. In 2015, when Stonewall adopted the T, that's when it really got embedded in the institution. But what we're managing to achieve now is a reverse of the policy capture. The institutions are becoming more neutral. You can be a lesbian and say it out loud. And I think it's important to know your rights and to act accordingly and without shame. It's easy to get in your head because we're made to feel like the out-group that we are, the out-group in our own minds and consider ourselves toxic. But I think we just need to come out of the closet, as it were. And yeah.
Thanks, Nicole, for such an eloquent description of the situation in universities at the moment, and also for your bravery in sticking out and speaking out against it. And endorse what you say about the importance of the forced stature decision and the debt we owe Maya, and also the importance, particularly for lesbians, of Alison Bailey's victory. And also the importance of Kate and Bev's fight against mermaids. Hopefully we'll get a decision in that soon, and having sat in on that case as an observer, for most of it, I feel reasonably optimistic about the outcome. I do think law is a really powerful tool for us, and if there are any women here tonight who are in a difficult situation in their university or their job or their political party, please do come to speak to me at the end, and I can signpost you to resources and support, because the law is on your side now and you can defend yourself, and that's something that's changed massively in the last 2 years. I wouldn't still be an SNP MP and still have the SNP whip if it wasn't for the law, and you can bet your bottom dollar that if they ever come after me, I will utilise the law.
I'm going to speak.
Right. So last but very much not least is Paula Bolton, who is a lesbian activist and the co-founder of Lesbian Labour. And I suppose I want to echo something that Mona said earlier, which has been, despite the fact that this fight that many of us are now engaged for our right to be lesbian has been painful, it's also been brought people together, and it's created great cross-party working, and I've particularly enjoyed working with my Lesbian Labour comrades on these issues, and they have done amazing work, and I really admire the women in the Labour Party for staying and fighting. And you know, if you were ever a member of the SNP and you want to come back, please do come back, because the only way the SNP is going to change in the next couple of years, but we need people to rejoin the party and vote in the next leadership election and vote for the future of the party and sort out the mess that's been created by the no debate culture. But anyway, that's just my little advert there for Lesbian Labour are very much a group with the sort of strength of LGBT Alliance, and as Kate points out, they also are banned from having a stand at the Labour Party conference. Paula's also a member of the Lesbian Strength Collective, and she's also a musician and composer who has many strings to her bow. Tonight she's on the fiddle, but first of all she's going to speak. Over to you, Paula.
Okay. Hello.
last is that others have said some of the things you're going to say, so there'll be little bits of repetition. And I hope you can all hear me, but I'd rather not use the mic because yeah. So I'd like to start with some audience participation. So I'm going to invite you to relax and just close your eyes. And I want you to bring to mind your perfect partner, your heart's desire, and hold that image, keep it to yourself, because what turns you on is, after all, entirely a private matter. Now imagine someone who you couldn't possibly be physically attracted to because of their sex. Imagine being told that you need to work on broadening your sexual preference to be all-encompassing. Open your eyes. That's what I call conversion practice.
Yep.
And as lesbians, if we fail to broaden up, we are branded as sexual racists by the CEO of the very organisation set up originally to advocate for those who share our sexual orientation. In fact, the name that we've used for centuries to describe ourselves is now being used to mean something entirely different. Welcome to being a lesbian in 2023. Now, if you have no doubts and can hold your own, as Rona already said, like Anne Lister in 1821, you may respond eloquently and say, I love and only love the fairer sex, and thus beloved by them in turn, my heart revolts from any love but theirs. And looking at the self-assured ranks of lesbians in front of me, I'm sure you'd be on that team. However, you may be affronted, dismiss it all as nonsense, or God forbid, be offended. But you will carry on loving who you love, regardless. Operating under the radar, as we always used to, secret meetings, underground networks, away from the withering glare of the misogynistic patriarchal spotlight. But imagine you're a young, gender non-conforming teenage girl, struggling through puberty, desperate to escape the hypersexualization and hyperfeminization all around you. Perhaps you identify as non-binary, a breathing space. Or perhaps you reject the mighty phallus and declare that you are indeed a lesbian. Off you go to a shiny, fun, well-funded, queer or LGBT WTF uniform. For those who are different. Home at last, you say, you fancy girls. They ask you, are you sure you're not actually a boy trapped in a girl's body? More conversion pressure. If you stick to your guns, you get the sexual racist treatment, pressured to accept male bodies into your dating pool, and told you're transphobic if you don't. To those young women, we say a lesbian is an exclusively same-sex attracted human female, and we don't do dick. We are protected, as we've heard, under the Equality Act on the basis of sexual orientation. Gender identity and sexual orientation are two completely separate things. They've never been comfortable bedfellows. Forced teaming isn't working. So let's call an end to that meaningless, ever-expanding acronym which just allows people to tick box their way through diversity requirements. Address each group individually. We're lesbians, we're not LGBTQ women. And we need to be visible and audible so that those emerging lesbians know that they are okay just as they are. So that they can see what a future lesbian life might look like. Of course, as Rona pointed out the other day to me, there were no role models for us when we came out, but we found a way. So can we hope that young lesbians will do the same? Lesbianism will out wherever, won't it? However, we weren't up against the trans Borg. An ideology and propaganda telling us that we were something else entirely. They've got a different battle and we need to help them. A young 14-year-old recently told my friend that she'd decided she was trans. Last time we spoke, you said you were a lesbian, she challenged. Well, I don't know how to be one. I mean, what do lesbians even wear? I know what trans people look like. That's a young 14-year-old in a school where 12 out of the 15 in that particular group identify as something else. I also want to mention the issue of the number of lesbians, especially butch lesbians, who are transitioning. Hands up if you know a lesbian who has transitioned. Okay. That's 3 types of invisible lesbians right there. Youngsters who get diverted, established lesbians gone underground again, and lesbians opting to transition. But there is growing resistance, and we're fighting back in numerous ways. One way I resist is, as mentioned, within a political party. Having been a founder signatory of Labour Women's Declaration with Shreen and others, and part of the working group, it occurred to me that there were a lot of lesbians to be found organising within the biggest political party in Europe, and thousands more across the trade union movement. That's quite a big catchment area, wouldn't you say? If we end up with a Labour government, which some think is likely, it needs to understand what a lesbian is. So in November 2020, I co-founded Lesbian Labour. It's a slow, tortuous process, doing battle with a party which is still a Stonewall diversity champion, which receives training from gendered intelligence, and according to today's news, may end up giving membership to ex-Tory Ian Anderson, the chair of Stonewall. I don't know if you saw that in the news. I mean, it won't give membership to Karen Ngala Smith, but there you go, pick your members. A party which has made a manifesto commitment to do the impossible, maintain the Equality Act 2010 single-sex exemptions whilst modernising the GRA. We know that's not possible, but we wait with bated breath to hear how they think it will be. And how will that work in practice? So in trying to put the case in Labour, we're up against LGBT plus Labour, who refuse to work with us. This is a quote from their letter. Your public priorities reflect the priorities of only a negligible proportion of lesbians in Labour. Our most senior Labour politician, lesbian politician, already mentioned, Angela Eagle, has as yet not once responded to our requests to meet. Similarly, Maria Exel, the president of the TUC, accused us of being a gateway drug to the far right and is maintaining a no debate stance. It's not right that one trade union after the other unthinkingly adopts self-ID with no member consultation, nor that we have to pretend to be one big, happy, ever-expanding, inclusive rainbow family, because we're not. We have the right to organise autonomously as lesbians in separate spaces in the time-honoured Labour movement tradition of caucuses, which are by their very nature exclusive, and that's okay. We don't want men in lesbian spaces. It's necessary to our survival to have male-free spaces. You cannot surgically remove male advantage, entitlement, or privilege. Hormones may decrease testosterone levels, but they do not reduce learned behaviour from lived experience growing up as a man in a man's world. So no thank you, Stonewall, for rewriting our sexual boundaries. We will keep them. Lesbians are, repeat after me, exclusively same-sex attracted adult human females. What are we? Exclusively human females. That's it. No wonder we're something else. I mean, Christ, if you have to define yourself with that amount of words. The need to gather with our own kind, which is brilliantly put by Sally, which you've already mentioned in her column recently, is as culturally necessary as to any other group in society. And we want a seat at the table on that basis. Now in Scotland, Scottish Labour could gain massive votes by being reasonable about sex-based rights. Meanwhile in Wales, Mark Drakeford, who's arguably the most powerful elected Labour politician in the UK, has failed to consult lesbians. The plan launched last week is a Stonewall document and should be ripped up. We know that he wishes to follow Nicola Sturgeon's example and bring in self-ID. Well, we know where that leads for lesbians, as Tonya has outlined. Now there's Rosa, a negligible lesbian from Malta, where self-ID is law, and she sent us this heartfelt warning. We can no longer have lesbian-only spaces. Young lesbians who are not feminine are being brainwashed and told they're men, with the unnecessary hormones and surgery that comes with it. Those who regret it are too scared to speak. Young lesbians no longer know what a lesbian is because they're taught to include men. This is lesbian erasure. It's conversion therapy. Conform to stereotypes or you'll be made to. Please do not do the same in the UK. Good luck. Now finally, I want to talk about lesbian networking. Is anybody else here a veteran of the women's peace movement? Hands up. I'm sure there are quite a few here. Okay, now the threats against us in those days was a shoot to kill policy. So we're not afraid of the current threats. A few daft lads dressed up with pink and blue hair, I mean, come on. We know how to weave a web. We are the spinsters, experts at word of mouth, gaydar, secret signals. It's how we've survived. Organising in small clusters, affinity groups. Impossible to find a leader and shut us down. And now we have social media as a tool, allowing this to spread internationally, and I personally bow to the goddess of Zoom. But remember this, 40 years ago, before mobile phones, we got 30,000 women to surround Greenham Common, and we never had funding. So being hidden and unfunded may be barriers, but that has never and will never stop us. I believe in strength in numbers. United we stand, divided we fall. So let's build alliances. Our lesbian revival is underway. Not only do we need to resist erasure, but we need to reclaim our roots and rebuild our culture. Lots of groups and individuals are doing this in different ways, in different spheres. All of us here play our part. We've got a lesbian immigration support group, Lesbian Fight Back, Get the L Out, Lesbian Rights Alliance, LGB Alliance Cymru, newly formed Scottish lesbians, Lesbians United in the USA, Sapphic Warriors Action Group, Vancouver Lesbian Collective, the Lesbian Spaces Initiative at Filia, the Proud Lesbians Project. Fortnightly, lesbians under lockdown meet on Zoom. Women from Tasmania, Alaska, Malta, Australia, Spain, Germany. We are everywhere, and we are organising. There's camping groups, book groups, lesbian discos, all moving the struggle forward, one step at a time. Have been doing for years. We are the canaries in the coal mine. We've built strength and resilience. Now, internationally, our sisters have a different battle. Remember, in 69 countries, homosexuality is still illegal. So I ask us to put our differences aside and work together for a safe and fair world for lesbians everywhere.
Yeah.
Thanks, Paula, particularly for reminding us of the international dimension and how many LGBT people still live in countries where there are no anti-discrimination laws and where they can risk life and limb simply by being out about their sexuality. I do think in 2015, when Stonewall had achieved all its aims in the United Kingdom, what it should have done was turn its attention to international activism. But anyway, it didn't, and here we are. Right, time for a bit of a Q&A. We've run over time a bit, but I think Q&A is really important, and we'll do that for about 15 minutes or so, and then we'll break up so people can have a drink. So my charming assistant Kate has got the roving mic, and yeah.
Charming assistant Kerry.
Oh, charming, even more charming, in fact, considerably more charming assistant. Sorry. Do we have any questions?
Shireen. Hello, I'm Shireen Benjamin. I'm being cheeky because I want to actually make an announcement. I've just picked up something on my phone, which is that the University of Reading, I thought this was going to happen today, and it has just been announced the University of Reading has quit from Stonewall. Basis of cost, which a couple of other universities said, but because it's not the best way to take the equality agenda. So I suppose my question to the panel is, what can we do? Because some of us have been trying very hard but getting very little traction. As Nicole said, universities are really important. We've got the next generations of third sector workers, of professionals, of private sector workers, all being taught that this ideology is unassailable and all pushing lesbians into the closet, young lesbians not being able to find themselves at universities. This really, really matters. It's not just kind of the privileged few. This is going to have a knock-on effect for years. So what is it we can do in universities such as Edinburgh, which are very captured and where it's very difficult to get traction? What can we reasonably do to put pressure on our university as lesbians to have a lesbian voice and to get them out of Stonewall?
Thanks. I think I'll take 3 and then we'll come back to the panel. Yes.
Sorry, I just would like to say I am probably, I don't know the extent to which I am not a lesbian. I'm an adult human female. I'm a mother and I'm married to a man. It's called Alistair, and he's very long suffering about me being involved in this issue. And I have a similar question. I'm very proud to stand next to Kitty and my friends from Edinburgh, and I'm very proud to call myself a friend of Shireen as well. We are involved in this issue as part of the Edinburgh Academics for Academics Freedom. And my question to you is, what can we do as heterosexual women, stale and pale and, sort of with children and so on and so forth? The reason why I became involved in these issues was actually because I came back to the University of Edinburgh after taking a year for maternity leave purposes. And it's amazing how taking a year out of an institution brings back the reality in great relief. And I realized how captured the institution was. And I have responsibilities to a 5-year-old. I cannot accept that somebody will go to my boy just seeing how much he likes Frozen and Barbie and say, oh, maybe you're wrong, you're born in the wrong body. And I'm like, no, he is perfect as he is. Thank you very much. So what can we do as women that are just heterosexual, pale and stale women to support you in this fight, which I think is absolutely vital? One thing I will say, and then I'll shut up, I see a lot of young people going through university, being also a lecturer in law at the University of Edinburgh. And what terrifies me is exactly what Nicole described, this intense capture and this intense pressure against gender non-conforming women, of which I was one, and like Rona, I found my own dimension in sports as well. And I am terrified that these women will be put through absolutely unending medical pathway, will be denied the joys of motherhood, as well as the curses of motherhood, but it's a lot of joy in bringing children to the world. So really, we are here to help. I am personally vouching for myself to say, I'm here to help. Just tell us what we can do to support you.
Thank you. I'll take 1 more here and then we'll have some answers and then we'll take a few more.
What's about
It's my heart.
My name is Sarah. I'm from Edinburgh. I work for myself, so I don't need to take too much nonsense from an employer. But I want to refer to Rona's statement about achieving solidarity in sisterhood. Now, I think we have, and anyone who was at Glasgow last Sunday as well couldn't fail to be bowled along by the solidarity there. You can't shove your granny off the bus. It was absolutely, we have achieved that. But we want to do more than that. We want to do more than achieve, or I do, achieve sisterhood. I want to win. I want to win against this pervasive ideology, gender ideology. It's easy to be in an echo chamber. We read what we read on Twitter. We read our, regular mainstream media. But we've got to have eyes which are open as well. I did read an article last night, somebody who published on Savage Minds. It was the last article of 2022. And it was a guy, and he was positive about gender critical things, but he was really pointing out that we are not home and dry by any means. And even with the Forstater judgment, which we're very happy with, that could be rolled back by the next Labour administration. So my question is just really a simple one to the panel. Are we going to win? Thank you. And how do we do it?
Thank you. Right, we've got 3 really good questions. First one is, what can we do about the universities, particularly to empower and support lesbians? Next question, which I think is rather a lovely question, what can our straight sisters do to support lesbians? And Sarah's question, how do we win, and will we win? Now I'm going to start with you, Rhoda, but you don't have to answer them all.
Well, this is really easy, isn't it? I think Shireen, I don't think anyone in this panel can tell you anything about how to win an election. Honestly. I mean, Shireen has at great cost herself been an absolute shining light for other lecturers and for students. I think the very fact that you exist, that your network exists, is a beacon of hope for students and other academics. Might not all be brave enough to admit it or join you, but the fact that you exist really matters. My friend is here who used to work at Edinburgh University, and she has a friend who left the university because of this and took an academic post abroad because they just couldn't stand it anymore and they couldn't face the fight. But for everyone that leaves because they can't stand, there'll be another who will be staying because of you, and I think that is undoubtedly true. When it comes to students, I see there's a new Students for Academic Freedom and Debate in universities. Some of the stuff's a bit dodgy around vaccines and everything, but never mind. But so I think it's happening. I think sometimes it feels like nothing's happening because you're in the vanguard of all of this. You are the first lot of people to speak out. You've been doing it for 2 or 3 years now, and it's fantastic. But there are others following. Shireen read the thing out about Reading University. Others have left. Others will follow. As to the question of, are we going to win? We absolutely are. And I've never been more hopeful. Some of you know I speak out on a regular basis about women in prison. We're winning that battle. We are absolutely winning that battle. I don't think there'll ever be another rapist put in a prison again. So the encouraging thing for me is if you saw the latest poll that Mandy Rhodes magazine did in Holyrood, and it was just published today, we're winning the public battle as well. The more, and if you look at the polls across the UK, the public who are most opposed to this are in Scotland, and it's because of all our activism. So everything we are doing is winning the battle. We're in it for the long run. I don't know that we'll be able to reverse this completely, but I think we will win the major victories. I've never been more hopeful than I am now that we're going to win.
Nicole, can I come to you next? I mean, obviously you've already told us a bit about your views about the universities. What about the second question? What can straight women do to support lesbians? Say within the university system first and foremost.
I think straight women, well, for you personally, I'm sure you both of you keep doing everything you're already doing. I don't imagine anyone here has got their pronouns in an email signature or anything like that. But if you do, take it out because it signals to your students that you're insane. If you have taken them out, have those difficult conversations like with your peers and tell them like, have you thought about that? You know, the lanyard, it seems like a nice thing to do, but it's actually quite an intimidating symbol of a political movement. So just like have these, like keep having these conversations with like colleagues and stuff. And in terms of like personally, I guess just keep uplifting lesbian voices, promoting like lesbian content, that kind of thing. And on the, I kind of want to ask the will we win thing. I feel like yes, and one of the ways I think we're going to get there is one of the advantages that the other side like have going for them is they have a whole culture. They have media, they have all the arts and everything like that. And so I think one of the key things that we have to do is create an alternative culture that people want to get in on. We have to change the incentives, and I think we're already doing that with like events like this and stuff. So I think we are winning with the policy culture, as I said, reversing it, prisons, all that kind of stuff. And I think one of the things we need to do as well is like keep morale up and create culture and joy and all that kind of stuff.
Tonya, can I ask you, do you think that we are going to win?
Yes, I think we're going to win. And it's like, because it's so much easier to just state the facts and tell the truth. And I think the only weapon actually trans activists have is their dirty way of shaming us all. And so I think in UK and here you're doing everything right. So it's just to continue this pathway of how we are working to change it. And I think also on a personal level it's important for like you straight people to when you hear or see a lesbian trying to argue for like then go and talk to her, because it can be quite lonely. So it's that one comes and tells you I support you, that it means a lot. So yeah.
Can I ask a question just in terms of
Well, I'm just going to finish off this round and then I'll come to you next and then I'll come
I'm
on to
gonna
the
crawl out.
No, but just we'll put it. Is it particularly related to this?
I don't think so.
We're going to take another round of three and I'll start with you, and there's at least two people over there I don't really know. I was just going to say on the can we win question, which I think is the main question, I think we will win as well. I wouldn't necessarily have said that a year and a half ago, or maybe even a year ago, but I think the events of the last 6 weeks in Scotland have been immensely heartening, because it has completely stopped for a long time we've been fighting the no debate culture, and we were starting to win that already, but although the bill passed at the end of the year, almost immediately we've had examples of what all of us have been saying all along. And the idea that the stories in the papers at the moment, particularly about the rapist and about that other madman who wants to be in a women's prison, we've got politicians like Alec Cole-Hamilton saying that's got nothing to do with the GRR bill. Rubbish, it's got everything to do with it. The GRR bill is the legislative embodiment of the idea of gender self-ID that we know has already taken hold in lots of institutions, and lots of the public were unaware of it. Other members of the public were aware of it and afraid to speak out. It was only a very small minority of people who were speaking out. But now the awareness is all over the tabloids. That must be killing politicians on the left, because working class people know about it now. That was a real worry for my party and a real worry for the Labour Party, with a big election coming up probably next year. So I think we are going to win, because I think the penny has dropped in areas of the public. Newspapers that were not covering this at all have now got it on the front page every day. I also think we'll win because of the law. You're absolutely right. If a Labour government came in, Forstater could be overturned, the Equality Act could be changed, but a Labour government can't change the European Convention on Human Rights. Exactly. And our rights as same-sex attracted people are protected by the convention, and more importantly by the case law. The jurisprudence has been generated by the court. So for so long as we're subject to the Convention on Human Rights, then we can fight against discrimination against same-sex attracted people, and we can also fight for freedom of association, freedom of speech, freedom of belief. People get very focused on the Equality Act and the GRR's impact on the Equality Act, but the ECHR is just as important. And Maya's case, Article 9 and Article 10 were very important in Maya winning her case. So if a Labour government tried to fiddle around with that, they could find themselves in court. And I think Labour are changing. I think there's a lot going on behind the scenes in the Labour Party just now. I think the leader of the Scottish Labour Party is probably realising that he missed a massive political opportunity by not thinking more carefully about the GRR. And I think politicians of the left in particular should care about human rights. And the whole analysis that underpinned the GRR was completely flawed, because it only looked at the rights of one group. Of course we should care about trans rights, but any piece of legislation should be analysed not just in relation to the rights of the people it's supposed to be helping, but in relation to its impacts on everyone else's rights, because human rights are universal. Anyway, I'm going to shut up now. Start with round 2 of questions.
Can I
For
just,
naughty girl Anne.
Joanna, I just wanted to say something in response. You asked about what heterosexual women, you mentioned being a mother. I think it's really important that you start by telling your kids that they're being brainwashed. Because I know so many women that let's just, warn them before they get to school. Tell them that there's this thing happening and that it's just another thing, A few years ago they might have been grungers or goths, but this is just to follow the trend and be yourself. Because if they go in with that, they've already, if you don't give them anything, then you've got to undo it all. You know, that's really hard. And the other thing is to break down, every time somebody says LGBT, stop them in the tracks and ask them who they're talking about. And that really, really, really helps, because people, you know, they want to be supportive. That, oh, well, if I say that, won't I be seen as homophobic? No, it needs broken down, and we need everyone to involve themselves in helping us make that clear.
Thanks, Paula. Sorry, I'll let you right there. I had meant to. Right, I'm conscious of the time, so I want to take 3 nice short questions. I want to start with Anne, and I want to start with somebody over there who had their hand up in the first round that I missed. Yes, I know I can see Kate, but it was somebody else. Yeah. Yes, it was you, yes, yeah. Start with Anne, and then the young woman there.
I was only going to ask a question. It was an old tanky, an old Communist Party member, and these things never infected us, never, you know, we didn't have a clue what was going on. And I just wondered, is there a political party that we could actually cling to? Is there do we call them ultra-leftists? Do we say they're socialist workers? I mean, I look at all these kids, and I just don't know if they know how political this whole issue is, and who is representing us. How short was that?
Nice and short, right behind you. Yes, no, the young lady there, yeah.
Hi there, I'm Freya, I'm a lesbian, I'm a radical feminist, and as you can tell, I'm also quite a young woman. So I'm just starting out in my career. I'm actually in the legal field as well. I work for Citizens Advice, and it's the most fulfilling work I've ever done. But also, recently hearing what Citizens Advice management in England and Wales and even Scotland is saying about putting your pronouns in your email signature and all that, it's intimidating. It makes me feel that at work, when I'm supporting vulnerable communities, I'm not even allowed to recognise that one of those vulnerable communities is women and lesbians. Like Rona, I grew up in conservative Christianity, and as a young woman, it feels like I went straight from the conservative Christian brand of you can't be open about your sexuality to the trans and queer brand of you can't be open about your sexuality. Going straight into that, and I just wanted to ask, especially in the legal field, what advice would you give to young women who are just starting out in their careers, who don't have the established careers that a lot of the older women in this room do? Because I want to speak up for my rights, but I'm worried. I'm scared that I'll be ostracised from every job, every opportunity, even if I know I'm legally protected. In a field that cares so much about your reputation, the connections that you make, what can I do to stand up for my beliefs, but still care about my career and my future? What would you say?
Okay, got another question over here.
Thank you so much to all the presenters. I have one very small comment and one question. The comment, I came a little bit after you started your speech already, Tonya, so it is about Norway. I just wanted to share that we have a member, and by we I mean European Network of Migrant Women, our board member who's an Afghan woman, and she's in Norway right now. She used to be in Sweden, and she tried to establish an organization in which that will be exclusively for women. And her statutes that they submitted to some authority were rejected 2 times, and they last week obtained a decision from some kind of tribunal, some kind of court, that what is written in their statutes is not against the Norwegian law, and what is written is that only born women can become their members, and trans and men who identify as women cannot join their membership. So it was just very interesting and good news in the context of Norway. And the question that I wanted to ask, it's a difficult one. Well, some of you are veterans of the lesbian movement, which I'm not, and I'm also from Russia, so I definitely grew up without any role models. But I work in the context and in spaces where there are a lot of lesbians that I meet who actively promote gender ideology. They're not just the victims of this ideology. Actually, they are in lesbian relationship. They're not transitioning themselves. I'm speaking about women who established the Lesbian Asterix European Conference. I'm speaking about women like Nancy Kelly, right, with the Stonewall chair. And I don't even mention gay men who wrote the Yoga Carta principles. But what do we actually say? We submitted a motion to protect lesbians in the European Women's Lobby. Do you know who opposed us? There were lesbians who came and they said, this is controversial, this is against lesbians, this is splitting the movement. So what do we say?
Thank you. That is a really difficult one, I think. Really difficult question. Tonya, do you want to have a go at that? What do we say? What do we say? Because you're absolutely right. There are many lesbians who say, you don't represent me. I'm quite happy with gender ideology, blah, blah, blah. What do we say to them?
Well, the thing is, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes. The thing is that it doesn't matter that they don't care, but to be a lesbian is to be same-sex attracted, and it should be protected to be same-sex attracted. So when these lesbians that are part of the TQ movement argue that they agree on the gender identity politics, they actually neglect the lesbians that in a way it's a kind of sexual harassment to go like to agree that the men can be lesbians. So we have to stick to the fact, definition of lesbians, that we are same sex. I don't know, my English is not so good, but it's like they ignore the fact of what lesbianism is.
Yeah.
And when we do legislations and laws, you have to stick to facts, not we should be kind or we should be inclusive, because if these law legislations, if being lesbians includes men, then there's no more, then you destroy the definition of it. So, but I think, I was just thinking about maybe it should be an idea to have like lesbian only international group, because there's so few. I think in Norway it's maybe 15 young lesbians that but they don't dare to organize. But if you have like an international group that could speak for young lesbians who are like isolated in a way, maybe that would be an idea as a reference group for united things.
I mean, I would say the answer to those lesbians who say, those of us who have concerns and want to organise on the basis of same-sex attraction, the great answer, and Alison Bailey said it in her keynote speech at the first LGB Alliance conference, she said, our rights as LGB people are not conditional on accepting gender identity ideology. So if some LGB people want to accept gender identity ideology, that's fine. If some lesbians believe that a lesbian can have a penis, that's fine. If that's what she wants to believe, fine. But the rest of us don't have to believe it. We don't have to believe it, and we are entitled to organise on the basis that we're same-sex attracted. And the law says that. The law in the United Kingdom gives us the right to do that. And actually, you could argue also on the basis of international treaties like the Convention on Human Rights, the international law gives us the right to do it as well. So I think that's the answer. We're not trying to enforce our belief on you. We're just trying to say to you that our rights aren't conditional on accepting your belief system, which is not a description of reality, it's just a belief system. Anyway, Chair's not supposed to say as much as I'm saying. I want to ask Anne's question before we come back to Freya's question. Is there a party we can turn to? Because where do we turn? Apart from the Conservative Party, and I suspect most of us wouldn't really want to turn there, and even they are captured to an extent by this. But is there a party? It's interesting that you mentioned the Communist Party, because the Morning Star has been bloody fantastic.
I was
It's really covered this issue. bring you in on that.
Okay.
Paula.
What I was going to say is we had Women Uniting as well, which was all the cross-party groups, and we actually, the only party that actually had a sex-based analysis was the Communist Party. So, you know, but it's always been small, you know, and it's there's so much misogyny right the way through it, you know, but at least you're arguing in the old words. There's an argument to be had there, and I mean, lots of people are talking about starting a new party. Quite honestly, I think that is what we need to do, even if it is only to be able to have the arguments. You know, so I don't know if Elaine's arrived yet, but you know, independence. There she is. There we go. Yes. Whatever, but it's the time.
No. Just on Freya's question, I really want to get someone to address Freya's question. Maybe get Rona to address. You know, what support can us tired old dykes give to the younger ones who are facing, you know, things like compelled speech, pronouns in your emails and that sort of thing. You know, what can we do?
Well, first thing I want to say, Freya, is I couldn't in all conscience tell you to stand up on your own in your workplace. I wouldn't do that because I know how difficult it is, and I wouldn't want to expose you to that. Some people have done it and have managed to battle through, like Nicole's outstanding, but I wouldn't do that to any young one looking to stand against us. I wouldn't advise them to. If you feel you want to, that's a different thing. And sometimes I think if you start conversations with people, you find that other people are actually more on your side than you realise. So it might be possible over time to garner some support, and for a few of you to say, see, this pronoun thing, we don't think that's right, you know, and we don't think that we should be forced to do that. Don't do it on your own. So I think for the time being, and until you get further into your career, maybe start some of those probing conversations, you'll have to take your strength and solidarity from groups like us and from the group that you're involved with already. And I hope nobody expected me to say anything different, because I wouldn't do that to a young woman. And I said already, I think it's up to us to stand up for you and to fight those battles, to fight the kind of battle that Maya Forster did, to fight battles against compelled speech, so that it becomes the norm for people to say, well, I don't really want to put my pronouns in, but you just keep doing what you're doing, because other people will reach out to you as well. And there are signs, it's a bit like gaydar, isn't it? There are signs that people don't believe this tossery nonsense. Just stay where you are, and do what you do.
I think also in lots of workplaces now, people are starting to organise on the basis of our views. So I know, like in the civil service now, for example, at the Philia conference, I met some women who've set up a body in the civil service with men and women to fight back against us. So there's a professional body for people to turn to. Now, we've really gone over time, so I know there'll be lots of other questions, and I haven't managed to take everyone who had their hand up, but we need to move on to the next stage of the evening. I know you were desperate to ask a question, Kate, and as you've suffered worse than anyone else in the room, I'll let you ask a question.
It's not a question, it's loads of answers. Yeah, okay, so we're half an hour late. I'm only going to speak for 45 minutes. Now, I've got all the answers.
If you speak for longer than 5 minutes, if you speak for longer than 5 minutes,
quickly.
No, hang on a second. If you speak for longer than 5 minutes, I'm going to shout the word penis at you, and you burst into tears and you'll shut up.
The crying lesbian. Shireen's question, what can we do at universities to stop this shit? Can I just say, our existence as LGBT Alliance has been built on disrupting the narrative. Everything we do, we say, will this disrupt the narrative? So please invite LGBT Alliance to speak at any university, place of employment. Please do. If the meeting gets shut down, so much the better. We never say no. In fact, we quite often say yes to invitations, and then people realise who we are and write back and say, don't come. So that's the first thing. The second thing is, please mention LGBT Alliance, because we need to be as well known as Stonewall. And what really gets me quite irritated is when somebody like Nick Robinson says to Ian Anderson, why aren't you speaking to groups like Women's Place UK? Well, he should have said, why aren't you speaking to LGBT Alliance, who are the inheritors of what used to be good about Stonewall. So please talk about LGBT Alliance every day of the week, whenever it comes up. So the next thing is, don't talk about our gender critical views. In our trial, Mr. Gibbon and others kept trying to tell me that we were a gender critical group. I said, we're not. This is nothing about being gender critical. This is about biology. It's about the values of the Enlightenment. It's about science. It's about reason. It's about dialogue. Don't try and shove us into a little box of gender critical. We're fighting for the freedom to be homosexual. So please repeat that message. We're not the same as gender critical groups. We are here because we love each other, and we're not going to be put back in the closet. So please say lesbian a lot. Very helpful, I find, in workplaces. If you go into a meeting and everybody looks the same, say, well, where are all the black disabled lesbians today? And I used to do that for years at American Express, and it certainly helped my career. The other thing is about saying that lesbians are pushing this ideology. We know that. Now, are we going to win? Yes. You said, how are we going to do it, and what can the straights do to help? You have to do the same as we do. You have to keep telling the truth. That's all. So when Nancy Kelly says you're anti-Semitic and no, there are two sexes. There are groups of people who are attracted to people of the same sex, and we will never give up. It's really, really simple. And one other thing is we hope we may have to give some press conferences after our judgment, especially if we're found guilty and we have to go to the tower. What we're going to do, I refuse anymore to use LGBTQIA+, ever. So Beverly and I have been scheming with Barker about what we're going to, the language we're going to use. And what we're going to start saying is QT+ groups, like Stonewall. And I would encourage you to do the same. And my final point, chairperson, with the spotty shirt, my final point is that Alison, this has been a huge up and down for all of us. Every single one of us in this room has suffered as a result of these mad ideological lunatics. But Alison just said to me one day, look, and this has come from other groups around the world, let's focus on Turf Island. Because people around the world, in Malta, in Norway, in New Zealand, in Mexico, in Spain, you name it, they're depending on us to win. And I often remember that when I'm getting desperate about what's happening. I think, I am living in the best country in the world to fight this. And I am so proud to be a lesbian in Turf Island. But final message, try to say lesbian at least once a day in your place of work or social environment. Thank you very much.
Can I just quickly thank all the panelists and say that we're I don't know what the hell that is. Anyway, we are running late, but can we still have a break, Kate, before we move to the next part?
We've switched off, but please now mingle. Go powder your nose, and please have a drink, a cup of tea, cakes, whatever, and we'll give you a shout in about 20 minutes back here for the